Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Season 4 of Itasca Water's Practical Water Wisdom series, which focuses on issues related to water and ways to resolve those issues. I'm your host, Hillary Sorensen with Minnesota Sea Grant, filling in today for Brian Whittemore. Today's episode is called Banded Mystery Snail and its Effect on Lakes. Itasca Waters is a nonprofit, totally volunteer organization. We're headquartered in the Itasca Headwaters region of Minnesota for the purpose of educating folks about the value of clean water for the environment and the economy. Itasca Waters has provided 15 years of protecting and promoting clean water in the region. It has brought in over $3 million in grants and contributions, all used for water science and education. It has educated thousands of students and community members, strengthened local conservation resources, and has been recognized as a key nonprofit for lake and watershed stewardship. It is located in and focused on the headwaters of the Mississippi River, the Great Lakes, and the Hudson Bay. But you don't need to live near us to join Itasca Waters. Please consider becoming a member of Itasca Waters by using the QR code on your screen or by going to itascawaters.org /donate and using the guest login. Membership is quick, secure, deductible, and is only $35. We would like to thank these partners for the past 4 years for contributing to and helping with our Water Wisdom series. Now, a few housekeeping items. Please make sure to keep your microphone on mute during the program and your video off. We will be recording this session. If you have a question, please enter it in the Q&A box located at the bottom of your screen. We will not be using the chat function today. And we will be sending out evaluations via email after this session. Your opinion is very important for informing the future subjects of this program. So as we mentioned, the subject for today is the banded mystery snail and its effect on lakes. Our expert presenter is Sarah Kingsbury. Sarah is the Senior Aquatic Invasive Species Biologist for Fisheries and Oceans Canada, working in Nova Scotia. She specializes in freshwater, non-indigenous species, but has multiple projects in marine ecosystems too. She likes working with data and is familiar with ecosystem-based and species habitat suitability modeling. Sarah also works with eDNA and genomics, screening level risk assessments, climate matching, and framework development. Mainly, she likes to work on projects that contribute to aquatic invasive species management. She completed her master's thesis at St. Mary's University in Halifax, Nova Scotia, studying the Chinese mystery snail. So welcome, Sarah, and please take it away.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. So I expanded a little bit on the topic for today. I hope that's okay. I decided to talk about all mystery snails in North America, all invasive mystery snails. And the reason why is because, well, for one, there's not a lot of information about specifically banded or Chinese mystery snails. A lot of what we know is from a small number of publications on the banded mystery snail side, or really just about Chinese mystery snails that are now being reclassified, some of those populations as Japanese mystery snails. In terms of my experience, I am a Canadian. So I am from the eastern coast of Canada in Nova Scotia, and I've highlighted it here in green on the map. So I'm all the way down here in the corner, just above Maine. And I work with a really small team. We are only 4 biologists, and we research and manage aquatic invasive species in Nova Scotia, working under the Canadian federal government. But we work in partnership very closely with our provincial and municipal colleagues. And we cover all aquatic invasive species and all aquatic habitats. So marine, brackish, freshwater. If it's in even a puddle, I will come when called. Okay, so how do we know what species should be where, and how do we decide what this term invasive means? Globally, there are general sections of faunal distribution or animal distribution, and that's just where species have kind of evolved over time to live. And if we look more into aquatic habitats, There are freshwater ecoregions of the world and marine ecoregions of the world. And this is where we have a general compilation of similar species. So in freshwater, we might have similar freshwater species. And then on the marine side, the ecoregions are often where there's a barrier of salinity or temperature that prohibits species from naturally moving across those habitats. Okay, so in terms of species moving across those natural distributions or those natural areas of where they've co-evolved with native species, they're often transported by anthropogenic vectors. So people moving species from a native region to a new habitat, the species is then establishing, reproducing, and spreading further out from that location. And that's how we get all of these fun terms like exotic and non-native and introduced. In Canada, we have a legal definition for aquatic invasive species. In the US or in your state, you might have a state or a federal definition that's a little different from what we're using. But if you hear me saying aquatic invasive species, that's kind of what I mean. It's this all-encompassing term for a species that was introduced, established, reproduced, and then spread. For mystery snails, we have three invasive mystery snails in North America. We have the Chinese mystery snail, which is that largest mystery snail on the left-hand side of the screen. And then there's Japanese mystery snail and banded mystery snail. I think in Minnesota, I was told that you have Chinese and banded mystery snail. So the Chinese one would be this large snail. You can see that the bottom whorl here is very large and globous. It's very rounded. And then the banded mystery snail is the smallest of the three. But you can see these clear bands running across the shell. All of the mystery snails have this, an operculum. It's a trap door, and that can really seal the shell shut. And that's why these snails are so good at impeding our management efforts to eradicate or control the species, because they're really not susceptible to being desiccated through drawdowns, through chemical eradications, and they're so robust that they spread really quickly. Both Chinese and Japanese mystery snails originate in Eastern Asia. This map is specific to Chinese mystery snails, so this graded area is where we know Chinese mystery snails are from. But all of this kind of yellow, blue area, those are locations that either claim the Chinese and Japanese mystery snails had originated there, or were recently found there and are thought to have naturalized that area. We don't really know because there's a lot of mixing that has happened in that area, but we do know that at least Chinese mystery snails have been found in the fossil records in that hatch location. In their native range, you're usually finding these snails in rice paddy fields. And in North America, we often find them in ponds, in shallow streams or slow-moving streams, sometimes in wetlands, lakes, anywhere really with a muddy, kind of silty bottom. Or this lower picture is actually a local lake here. And it is a very rocky lake, but you can see that there's this layer of silt that is settled over top of the rocks. And that's where you'll find the mystery snails, or between the large rocks. To further confuse us, Japanese and Chinese mystery snails were considered one species back in the 1890s when they were first introduced, and now they're considered separate species. And what we thought were a bunch of mystery snail populations might actually be Japanese mystery snails. So it is difficult to tell the two species apart. And of late, we've been using genetic identification to try and tell those two species apart, because morphologically, based off of their physical characteristics, they're very similar looking. So this map that I have is the known populations of Chinese mystery snails that, or reported populations of Chinese mystery snails in the US and Canada. But like I said, some of them might actually be Japanese mystery snails. Interestingly, in Canada, our distribution of invasive mystery snails really seems to map and follow what the US distribution is. So areas in the US that you're finding lots of this species, we're finding lots in Canada. And where you find a few records, we find a few in Canada. So it's interesting to see how interconnected our two countries are, because we do have species coming in and arriving from the Great Lakes, from the US, and also the US is one of our main importers for aquarium species, which is a common pathway for mystery snails. In terms of banded mystery snails, they're actually native to the US. So that orangey yellow color in the bottom right screen, that's the native range of the banded mystery snail. And all of the wine stained colors are the areas that the mystery snail or the banded mystery snail has been spread to. I borrowed this map from USGS. They've got a great website, and I've linked it at the end of my presentation if anyone wants to go check out what information they have. In Canada, we don't actually have maps like this of banded mystery snails, unfortunately. But we do know that there are some populations in southern Ontario, mostly around the Great Lakes and the tributaries, so kind of the northern reaches of the Great Lakes, and a little bit into southern Quebec, kind of St. Lawrence River up to maybe Quebec City area. In terms of pathways, the Japanese Chinese mystery snails we think were brought into North America in the 1890s as part of the Asian food market, and then continue to spread through aquarium releases or through accidental boater or fishing gear transfers. All of the mystery snails, banded, Chinese, Japanese, can climb on aquatic vegetation and then become entangled in propellers or fishing gear, and then moved accidentally between water bodies. I do find that those juveniles, when they're first coming out and emerging, they're very, very tiny. So it is difficult to detect them if you have a lot of aquatic vegetation on your vessel. And in terms of the pet and aquarium trade, this species used to be a very popular aquarium species. We recently did an aquarium species project in Nova Scotia, and we actually didn't find any Chinese mystery snails or Japanese mystery snails being sold in Nova Scotia, but we did find lots of mystery snail labeled species. So it seems that sometimes apple snails and mystery snails are being exchanged under different names within the aquarium trade. And this just further highlights my point that there's, you know, a million and one names to describe all of these mystery snails. So it makes it really complicated when you're trying to get some information and pull some good quality resources for your community groups. Both in, this is the Chinese names here for Chinese mystery snail, and then all of the names above are the French and English names for Chinese mystery snail. And the exact same thing is true for banded and Japanese mystery snail. I even saw recently that USGS changed the scientific name for banded mystery snail on their website, but some of the naming authorities like ITS hasn't accepted that name change yet. So there's a disconnect between names being changed, and that happens often in ecology. People will change a species name and then it has a ripple effect. We did manage to find at least what we think is all of the names for Chinese mystery snails. And then we did a literature review in 2019 to try and figure out what is the available information for Chinese mystery snail. You know, what do we know and what don't we know about this species? And we found 123 sources of information. Most of them, though, focused on the species ecology. So talking about like water type that they're found in or habitat type you might find the species in. Some information was available on biology as well, a little bit on distribution. The medical use and commercial use, that was really within the species native range only. So within their native range, where people and other animals have co-evolved to be in harmony with that species and to use that species, they are used in traditional Chinese medicine or as a lab reference organism or to extract some kind of valuable asset from the shell. But in terms of what we need for information in North America, we're lacking a lot of information around species management options, ecosystem impacts. There is some information on distribution, but it's usually more opportunistic information of someone found a snail here and we make a first report of the snails now here. It's not so much information predicting where a species could be distributed to. When we put all of that information together into this conceptual diagram, you'll see that most of the arrows, so this is Chinese mystery snail in the middle, most of the arrows are actually pointing away from that species, meaning that species has a greater impact on the environment than the environment is having on that species. And even when there is an impact of our native species on that mystery snail, it's usually that the mystery snail is like passing off that impact onto something else, a different species later on. So, for example, this parasite can infect the mystery snails, but often mystery snails can encapsulate parasites within their shells. So it doesn't actually hurt the snail or has minimal impact on the snail itself, but then it can be transferred to the host, whether that's a person, a fish, or ducks. And even the species that can consume the snails, like a North American fish, the fish typically will eat some mystery snails, but more of these native mollusk species, which is a problem because the population of the mollusk is already decreasing since the mystery snail is competing for the same location, the same habitat, the same food, and the same amount of dissolved calcium in the water. So the water has a certain amount of dissolved calcium that naturally occurs in all aquatic systems and is used by mussels and snails to grow their exoskeleton or the shells that encompass that organism. And the mystery snails are really large, so they take a lot of the calcium. And so even though this species is already competing with the native mussel species or the native snail species and decreasing the population, a lot of native fish species have co-evolved with our native mollusk species to predate native mollusk species. So that's their preferential food anyways, which really drives down that native mollusk population. Also, the mystery snail has really rapid reproduction. If you cut open a mystery snail, you can see on the inside of the females, it looks like a little factory inside the brooding pouch. So you'll have mystery snails all the way from an embryo that's developing down to a fully formed individual that's about to be birthed. And these mystery snails give birth to live individuals. So fully developed offspring that have the shell, the operculum, they will float, that trapdoor that closes them in and protects them. And they just crawl away from their mothers and they don't need their mothers anymore for any type of support. And they can go on living and, competing with the other native species the same as the adult would. Typically, the females grow larger and live longer than the males. For Japanese and Chinese mystery snails, it's 3 to 5 years. For banded mystery snails, it's maybe 2 to 4 years, and the males might only live like 1.5 years if they're particularly unlucky, I guess. The size of the female can really dictate the number of offspring that they have. The larger females will have more offspring, and they can have over 100 offspring per year. All of these offspring continue to increase the population density of the snail in the system and can lead to things like beach fouling, or if they have a mass mortality event, it's really unpleasant for homeowners. They might have waterfront property because they smell very bad when they die. It can also clog water intake pipes and impact irrigation screens. And each snail has two ways of eating. It can either scrape food off the benthos, so off of the sediment layer or the bottom layer of that lake ecosystem, or it can filter feed, which is taking nutrients from the water column, such as zooplankton and phytoplankton, and then transferring those nutrients that would have been naturally suspended in the water column into a benthic resource. So that's through fecal excretion. And that can increase the nitrogen to phosphorus ratios, which leads to algae blooms which can lead to eutrophication. In terms of banded mystery snails, it's very much the same impacts as Chinese and Japanese mystery snails. It's mass die-offs, it's parasites, it's high population densities, fish egg consumptions, impacts to water quality, shifting food webs. I even found one paper or one news article citing that over 3,000 aquatic birds died in northern Wisconsin after they ingested infected banded mystery snails. So they really can act as this biotransfer of contaminants, of parasites that get passed on from the mystery snails to whatever is consuming that mystery snail. In terms of spreading the species, in 2020, we tried to develop some habitat suitability models to see what might control that species spread. And we found that they're generally happy everywhere. This map is only showing Nova Scotia, but Nova Scotia is a really interesting case study, even for Minnesota, because we have such a wide range of pH and calcium levels. We have pH all the way down to 3, all the way up to 9. So that's a huge range of pH and very low calcium in our province. So theoretically, mystery snails, invasive mussels, anything that really requires like a hard exterior shell, crayfish, they shouldn't really be able to establish in Nova Scotia. But we're finding that these species are a lot more robust than we maybe had hoped for, and they are establishing in Nova Scotia and spreading here. In terms of salinity thresholds, which is really important for anyone who has a province, state, or country that borders some type of marine ecosystem, we found that salinity probably can impact or limit where species are dispersed, but we did find that adult mystery snails were able to withstand brackish conditions up to 15 parts per thousand salinity. That's what these two plots are showing. So this one on the left is showing weight range of adult and juvenile before and after at each part of the study. And you can see that they are losing weight. So the organism is stressed by that exposure to higher salinities, especially at this lower range or this upper range of 20 parts per thousand salinity. Same for the juveniles. But we did find that some adults were able to withstand the entire 14 days of exposure. So any place where you have kind of seasonal mixing of marine and freshwater ecosystems, they're probably able to withstand that mixing or that short exposure to higher salinity. In terms of food, that was another hypothesis we had. We thought maybe if we sterilized the environment and didn't feed the mystery snails and stuck them in a jar for 14 days, that they would all die because everything needs to eat. We actually found that the salinity did not, or sorry, the salinity, the food quantity did not have any negative impacts on the snail, besides maybe decreasing the weight, which of course, if you're not eating for 14 days, you're losing weight. But there was no major impacts on the snail. There was no impacts on the dissolved oxygen content, which is what DO percent means. TDS is total dissolved solids, so how much solids are suspended within the water column. And this is chlorophyll alpha, so whether or not that species was maybe producing some type of food source. We did find that within SCs for sterile environment, we found that the mystery snails were able to very drastically increase the amount of food within their own system. And in change of weight, this is natural system. This one would be sterile system, and this is enriched system. In the sterile system, there's no change of weight. In the natural system, again, these are completely unfed. Somehow they gain weight. The only downside we found to this whole, or the only limit we found to the whole project, was that in an enriched system, so in an eutrophic environment, some of the snails did die. And that's why you see a decrease in weight. But otherwise, the snails were fine for adults and juveniles. So they're very robust individuals. Well, after that, we started thinking we can't eradicate them. Um, we can't stop them with salinity, it seems, not with the amount of food. So we were really hoping that maybe their impacts to the ecosystem would be reliant on the density of that population. In Nova Scotia, we don't yet have very dense populations of mystery snails. So our hope was that they would not have any impact on the ecosystem until they reached a high density. So again, in our little jars, the 1 liter jars, we had one mystery snail, two mystery snails, and then four mystery snails, just multiplied by a factor of two each time to see where exactly those impacts were going to happen. And we thought it would only happen in that high density, which is the four mystery snail jar. What we found is that impacts already started to occur at that moderate population density scale. So at 2 snails per jar, you can see here, that's the yellow bar, there's a drastic increase in chlorophyll alpha. Surprisingly, there was actually less of a decrease in chlorophyll alpha for the 4 snails per jar. And we think that's probably because at some point the snails are both eating and producing chlorophyll alpha in more sustainable compositions or proportions. But you can see in terms of water quality, total dissolved solids is going up and dissolved oxygen. So the amount of oxygen available to the aquatic ecosystem is going down. And I did find these two papers that I've linked here. When you mix Chinese mystery snail with another invasive species such as goldfish or crayfish, the impacts to the invertebrate community, to your indigenous invertebrates, is very devastating, sometimes even going all the way to extinction, is what these two researchers have found. So even though the Chinese mystery snail might not yet be at such a dense population level that we're seeing year after year impacts, we're still concerned about it because we have these other invasive species, and when you mix them together, the impact on that ecosystem is even greater. Okay, so that was a bit of doom and gloom, I feel. Hopefully you're not too sad at this point. I do have some resources that hopefully will help combat Chinese and Japanese and banded mystery snails in your region, and some advice for how best to prevent their further spread. Clean, drain, dry, decontaminate is probably first and foremost. Watercraft fishing gear. Like I said, that species of mystery snails, they're very small when they're born. They're always on top of those aquatic vegetations. And whenever that vegetation gets wrapped around your boat propeller or it gets into your live well, you can accidentally spread those mystery snails between areas. So setting up things like watercraft, decontamination, and inspection stations, and really discouraging people from moving, whether it's bait fish or plants or any type of organic material between invaded, uninvaded, and invaded lakes would really help contain that population. Unfortunately, we have very few options available for species control and eradication. They are very robust and can survive for long periods outside of water. So doing some type of drawdown or chemical treatment is just more likely to impact your native species than this invasive species. I would also recommend working within your own state or your own communities on public education and outreach, having really good, clear resources that identify these species and show the difference between these invasive species and the native species is important, because we don't want people to accidentally remove a native species thinking it's invasive. So having, identification cards, signage, social media posts are great. Anything that you can do to get the word out there. And I would strongly recommend considering reaching out to your local pet stores and aquarium stores to see, are they selling mystery snails? If they're selling mystery snails, are they misidentifying mystery snails as a different species? A lot of times in Nova Scotia, at least, we find that what's sold here as mystery snail is actually an apple snail, um, which is another invasive type of snail. And working with your local regulators, managers to try and stem the influx of invasive species is very helpful, especially if they have some type of resource that explains where to report mystery snail sightings to and how to report it. That would be important to link the government officials and your regulators process for reporting with whatever community resources you're developing, just to make sure that the communication lines and that flow of information is all stemming together and functioning like you probably hope it will be. And importantly, whatever you do, it's going to be helpful to a number of invasive species. So whether that's education outreach or water inspection stations, it's helpful for mystery snails, for invasive mussels, invasive aquatic plants. So you really can't go wrong as long as you just start and try and get out there and get the word out. I never heard of mystery snails before I started working in Nova Scotia, and now we get, probably monthly reports from the public. So it really does work. And to that end, I did include some resources which I thought maybe could be useful to your community. You're very lucky in Minnesota. You have a wonderful research center that focused specifically on aquatic invasive species. So they have so many amazing resources. I would recommend reaching out to them, especially if you're going to develop some type of community outreach material. Also, your Department of Natural Resource has outreach material that you can pull from or try and collaborate with. And they also have information on how to report new species detections. So that would be important to include. In terms of larger groups, there's the Aquatic Nuisance Species Task Force. I am part of the Northeast Regional Panel, so the NIANS panel, but I do know that there is a Great Lakes Regional Panel, and they're a great group to work with. They're a mix of NGOs, researchers, government officials. They would be a great resource, I think, for you. Your government services like USGS always has amazing species web pages. So if you need a quick fact sheet about a species, that's always available to you. I linked here the banded mystery snail, so they're a great resource. And lastly, I linked this AIS Explorer dashboard that I found because it showed the connectivity between water bodies on the dashboard, which could be really useful if you're thinking about establishing some type of watercraft decontamination inspection station. You could either put a station near a water body or collection of water bodies that you're trying to protect from invasion, so some type of defensive management there, or you could offensively work on the watercraft inspection stations and focus those on invaded areas to try and contain that spread. That is all I have for you. I'll send it back to Hillary, and please do let me know if you have any questions. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Sarah. That was extremely informative and interesting. If you're enjoying today's Water Wisdom presentation, please consider becoming a member of Itasca Waters by using the QR code on your screen or going to itascawaters.org/donate and using the guest login. Okay, let's get to some questions. So handling this part of today's program will be Bill Grangis, manager of Itasca County's Aquatic Invasive Species Program and an Itasca Waters board member. Take it away, Bill.
Thank you, Hillary, and thank you, Sarah. For everybody out there, I want to remind you that if you want to submit questions, please use the question and answer tab, not the chat function. We're not using the chat function. Now, we may combine similar questions together, and if we don't get to your questions, and you'd still like an answer, please send us an email at info@itascawaters.org. I'll be sure to get an answer back to you. We have wow. We have a lot of questions here. First question I have for you, Sarah, Do native snails spread through connected waterways such as rivers and streams?
Yes, they do, but also so do the invasive ones. We actually had a aquarium, a large aquarium that we set up in our lab once for the mystery snail research, and we found that the juveniles would flip over and they would use their muscular foot like a sail and use that to push along with the water current created by the aquarium pump. So it seems like both the native and the invasive snails can use connected streams and water flow to spread.
They're clever little beasties, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Do mystery snails affect important aquatic plants such as wild rice? And are there risks to wildlife that eat them like fish or waterfowl?
There's definitely a risk to any species that is consuming mystery snails because they can harbor those parasites and also contaminants. They can bioaccumulate contaminants within their tissues and then pass that on to the consumers. But in terms of impacts to wild rice, I don't really know. Within their native range, they do occur normally within rice paddy fields. So I'm not sure what type of negative impact they would have on rice paddies.
It's a very hot topic here in northern Minnesota. We love our wild rice. Uh, okay, next question. What biological control or management options are currently being studied for invasive snails in cold northern climates? And how feasible are strategies such as targeting predators, pathogens, or habitat management for reducing their populations?
Wow, that's a lot.
Yeah.
There's a lot to unpack with that one. There are multiple types of chemical treatments like potash or copper-based solutions that you can add to water. But that's really more likely to impact your native species than this Chinese mystery snail. There has been other researchers that have done kind of mesocosm experiments to see how the snails react, and they are able to withstand multiple days of chemical treatment. So that's unlikely to be effective unless you can really prolong that chemical active agent within the water column, which is difficult when there's so much sediment in the water. I did talk last year with a group in the Northeast US, and they were trying to create some type of wave action in front of water intake screens at a hydro dam to try and prevent the mystery snails from clogging up those water intake screens. I'm not sure how that project ended. I think it was somewhat successful. They were able to dislodge some of the mystery snails, but when you get such a large population and you would have to constantly be doing this waving action in the water, I think it'd be really difficult to implement on a large scale. And then the other option that people try often for mollusk species is just drying them out, like drawing down all the water, drying them out, or freezing them. If there's a possibility for a freeze over, you could draw down the water and then let the ice set and freeze into the sediment. But again, the mystery snails are so good at burrowing within the sediment. They're very robust to desiccation. So we haven't found any effective solutions yet.
Very good. Well, we do say here that the northern Minnesota climate is one of the best decontamination techniques there are here, but still. Okay, next question. Is the recent uptick in mystery snail sightings consistent across all North America snail species, or are certain species increasing more rapidly than others? And if so, what ecological or human factors explain these differences?
Yeah, so there's actually a marked decline in North American native mollusk species. I think there was a research paper on that about 3 or 4 years ago that looked at all of the endangered mollusk species and how they have continually declined, especially unioids, so bivalves, any type of like lamp mussel or eastern elliptoid mussel. Whereas the invasive mollusk species, Dracena mussels, the mystery snail family, they really are expanding in their range distribution, especially in the last few years, probably because there's more movement of people around and less awareness of this potential to spread mystery snails or other mollusks on hull fouling or on hulls of foul boats. But in general, we're not really sure how climate change, if that's the question, how climate change is impacting the distribution of species. We do know that, especially in Canada, where we have kind of the subarctic area, we do know that there's more species that are able to spread to the subarctic and establish there. But a lot of these species, like mystery snails and whatnot, we're only finding them still in southern Canada and northern US. So it shouldn't really be related to climate change yet because they've already been there for many, many years and we're only getting warmer. So there shouldn't be any type of lessening of that population.
Very good. Well, here's a question from Lisa that probably everybody's thinking right now. So what should we do if we have Chinese mystery snails in our lake?
First thing I would say, you should take a bunch of pictures and report it to whatever reporting agency you have in Minnesota. I know for us in Nova Scotia, when we get reports from concerned citizens and they don't contain pictures, it's really, really hard to identify that species. So if you can take a picture of your suspected mystery snail, maybe beside a ruler so that there's some understanding of the size, and take a few photos of it from each angle, especially the opening of the shell where there might be that operculum. That's very helpful. Send all of those in with the location to your regulators or invasive species managers. And then outside of that, the only thing you can do at this point is try and contain those mystery snails. You could try and manually remove them, so picking them out one at a time, but they reproduce so quickly and the juveniles are so small. I'm not sure that'd be very practical. So really working with your local community to like raise awareness and track that invasion front. So how that species is spreading over time.
Very good, thank you. I know we love it when people call us and ask us to identify something they don't recognize. This kind of calls we love to get. Karen asks a question, can they be sterilized to prevent reproduction?
Yes, I guess you could. There is an entire field of invasion ecology focused on this, biological control angle and the ethics of biocontrol. So I would say that aspect of invasion ecology is very much still in development. There are some researchers in the US doing this type of sterilization and release method, mostly around fish and mosquitoes, I think. In terms of snails, I'm not sure yet anyone has been so interested as to try that. It is expensive and difficult, and there's a lot of research and development that go into how to sterilize the snails. So it would probably take multiple years before you ever saw that come to fruition.
Thank you for that. Next question. To what extent do poor shoreline practices, such as failing septic systems and the lack of vegetative buffers to absorb nutrient runoff, contribute to the increase in mystery snail populations?
That's a really interesting question. I'm not sure we've ever looked into that. We do find mystery snails more often associated with highly developed areas, so urban areas, urban lakes. But there's nothing to say that that's not just because there's more people there with aquariums dumping them or more boats moving around, transiting with those mystery snails. So yeah, I'm not really sure how a septic system would impact mystery snails, but if it is pushing that system to be eutrophic, the mystery snails are not well adapted to live within eutrophic environment. Of course, if you're creating more food, I think every animal loves that. And the more degraded a system is, the more likely an invasive species can adapt to that system, because they're usually a generalist and can adapt to somewhat degraded systems. But if it's fully eutrophic, I don't think you're going to promote a Chinese mystery snail establishment.
Very good. Next question, sort of touched on, but what are the main pathways by which non-native snails are entering northern Minnesota lakes and rivers? For example, hitchhiking on boats, fishing gear, or aquatic plants moved between lakes, or through aquarium releases and water garden plants.
Well, I would have to ask you, I guess, is it illegal to transfer fish and plants between water bodies in Minnesota? No, that's not
No,
a rule.
no.
Okay, well, in Nova Scotia, it is a rule, and we still see spread. So definitely happening through aquarium trade and accidental boater transfers. But if people are transiting with plants, especially, or a bucket full of fish, and they don't notice that they have a snail in it, it's very possible that they're moving mystery snails with those transfers.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, we make sure we tell our boaters that remove all mud and any plants or anything like that when our inspectors meet them at the landings. Okay. Oh, here's a good one. This comes up all the time. Swimmer's itch. Is swimmer's itch more prevalent in lakes where mystery snails are present? And what does current research suggest about their role in hosting or amplifying the parasite responsible?
There's actually no statistical significance between lakes with and without mystery snails. There was a recent publication, I think, from the ICASE special edition, so the International Conference of Aquatic Invasive Species special edition journal had something in it about mystery snails and swimmer's itch, and they didn't find any type of correlation between those two.
Okay. Next question from Kathy. If humans eat fish that have the trematode worms from eating the mystery snails, will they get the parasites too?
I'm not really a parasitologist, so I don't know exactly how that works, but mystery snails can definitely host all types of parasites, and this can be transferred to a fish. From what I understand of parasitology, the parasite is usually very host specific. So unless you are a host in which the parasite can live and reproduce in and infect, you're probably fine.
Mm-hmm.
But with the mystery snails, they do have a number of parasites, some of which could be harmful to humans. And also there's the fact that they accumulate contaminants, so mercury and arsenic and whatever else you have in your lake.
Sure.
And that's certainly something you don't want to consume either.
Thank you for that. Next question is, beyond their high reproductive output, what other ecological or environmental factors might be driving the recent increase in mystery snail sightings?
Well, I don't know. Is it maybe that there's more people aware of it and more people who are interested in this topic? I know in Nova Scotia this year alone, I've had probably, I don't know, 15 reports of mystery snail sighting. And they're typically not new reports or of new areas. It's just people seem to be more aware of it because there's more education outreach going on around mystery snails, especially in the last maybe 5, 6 years. I've noticed there's a lot more talk or chatter about banded Chinese and Japanese, well, less Japanese, but definitely Chinese and banded mystery snails seem to be a hot topic.
Very much so. Education is very, very crucial there. Next question here. What new tools, such as environmental DNA, remote sensing, or citizen science groups are being used to detect mystery snails early and track their spread?
I think it depends a lot on where you're located and the motivations, I guess, and the current monitoring programs that your state has in place. In Nova Scotia, we do environmental DNA sampling of marine and freshwater sites, and we do have a targeted qPCR assay that detects mystery snails. So that's one thing that we do every year. We also do angling sites and or lake angling to find invasive fish. But when we're out doing the lake angling, we do shoreline checks since we're there anyways, check for plants, check for mystery snails. Um, and for ROVs, you can try and use an ROV if you have a very deep lake. Maybe for your Great Lakes sites, that would be good. But for Nova Scotia, we have very shallow lakes with a lot of vegetation. So using ROVs here is not useful at all. They just get tangled in everything. But definitely where you're located with a Great Lakes site, maybe you could use an ROV to scan the benthos for mystery snails. I have used it one time here in Nova Scotia, and I will say it's very hard to tell the difference between a mystery snail and a rock. They look the same underwater and they're the same color. So good luck to whoever wants to try that.
Very good. Next question. What role can bait shops, marinas, and resorts play in preventing the spread?
I think a lot of the education piece, again, like telling people about the issues around mystery snail release and how their boat fouling might be contributing to mystery snails being transited between lakes. I do find sometimes, I don't know if you call it the same thing in the US, but we call it Don't Let It Loose. We have like a social campaign where we're talking to anglers about not letting loose different types of bait, or aquarium owners not letting loose their aquarium species. But I find that a lot of the times it's not explained well enough how those anglers might accidentally be transiting with an unintended species. It's obvious not to let loose that targeted species, whether it's a fish or a crayfish that you're trying to move between lakes, and we're saying, don't do that. But it's not always obvious, like the water itself that you're moving between areas is a vector as well for that transit.
Yeah, I think our one program we have here, Habitat Attitude, we do exchanges of things like that. And everybody's very familiar with the monster goldfish that we're seeing now. So that's a key educational point, not to release those things. Okay, next question. What effects do mystery snails have on native snails, and fish, and how might they alter food webs or nutrient cycling in northern waters?
Those are like multiple questions within one question. But I'll start, I guess, with the water quality, because that impacts the entire food web, and the structure of that food web is connected to environmental water quality or habitat structure itself. Mystery snails are an ecosystem engineer, so they change the physical habitat in which the species live, whether it's plants or fish or waterfowl or other mollusks. And they do that through a number of methods. They're consuming fish eggs, they're consuming plants, they're competing for space. They actually will change the water chemistry itself by, if it's a more acidic environment, the calcium from that shell can be leached into that water and make that more basic. And they can also create this kind of dense, hard bottom when there's multiple snails dying at one time and there's a mass mortality event. Now that shoreline that used to be soft and sandy and silty becomes hard, and that gives a new settling location for other invasive species like Dracaena mussels that can now settle on a hard substrate. And they also change the water chemistry or the nutrient cycling in terms of nitrogen and phosphorus, and that can impact the algae growth, and the algae growth then impacts the amount of dissolved oxygen that's available for native species. So it really has this whole trickle-on effect of changing the entire ecosystem structure, and especially our native species. I don't know, maybe in Minnesota, maybe you have more catfish or something that are very resistant to low oxygen. But in Nova Scotia, we have a lot of trout and salmonoid species. We don't have a lot of sunfish. We don't have a lot of catfish. And we don't have any fish that actually have gapes that are large enough to consume mystery snails. So that just impacts the entire food web from the top down.
Mm. Thank you for that. We have time for another question or two here. Next question, how might northern freshwater ecosystems adapt over time to mystery snail invasions? And are there examples of native species or systems showing resilience?
I think there can be systems that are more resilient in Nova Scotia and in, well, even Eastern Canada in general, wherever we have mystery snails, we haven't been seeing huge impacts until last year. Last year was the first year that we saw mass mortality events that actually did impact the people in that ecosystem. It's important to also remember that you as a human, you are part of that ecosystem. You're using that ecosystem too. So the mystery snails that had mass mortality events in Nova Scotia, they did impact the people, but they didn't impact the fish. They didn't impact the other snail species or plant species. So far, the native species in these northern east-north reaches of their range seem to be generally unimpacted by those invasions. We haven't really looked to see what the whole food web impact is. For example, we've never done stable isotope analysis on these species. So with isotopes, you can see what position in the food web those species are occupying, and you can compare reference lakes that don't have an invasion to lakes that do, and try and see what those changes or shifts have been over time, especially if you have lakes that have a variety of population densities or times since they've been invaded. And we haven't done that yet in Canada, at least. I think there's a researcher in the US that's hoping to do that. But we don't see the impacts other than this occasional mass die-off. So that is concerning. We're not sure if we're at maybe a tipping point. If you look at the invasion curve, there's kind of that low lag phase where you don't see any population growth or any real impacts, and then it kind of shoots up in this exponential way before it starts plateauing and petering out. And we're not really sure if maybe we're on that curve, that exponential curve to go up, where we're going to see more of those impacts.
Sarah, thank you very much for the great presentation. Those fantastic answers. Hillary, back over to you.
Thanks, Bill, and thank you so much, Sarah. Thank you, everyone, for attending today. This program will be available soon on our website, itascawaters.org. Please feel free to recommend it to family, friends, and neighbors. And also, we are very interested in your ideas about the Water Wisdom series, so please respond to the evaluation form that will be emailed to you. The next program will be on December 4th and will feature Dr. John Downing, myself with Minnesota Sea Grant, as well as coloring book author Sawyer Lawrence and storyteller Holly Risto talking about water wishes for the holidays. You can register for free on itascawaters.org. While you're on the website, please consider becoming a member at itascawaters.org/donate or follow the QR code on your screen. I'm Hillary Sorensen. Thank you so much for joining us today.